Welcome back to the complete story for Assassin's Creed. It's time that we move forward with the story for Altair. But with all the bad press coming out about Assassin's Creed Unity, I wanted to ask you, are you enjoying the game itself? Because I personally loved it. Now before we can get to how Altair's life ended, we need to tell a short story, the one called Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. Now this was a direct sequel to the main game, and it came out only on the PSP. So after we go through that, we're going to be going through a series of history lesson style marks as to what happens to Altair before we can go to the story from Revelations. So let's get through this so that we can focus on Arno next. Shortly after killing his own master, whom he secretly found was a Templar, Altair heard rumors of Templars fleeing to Cyprus. To prevent this from happening, he infiltrated one of their strongholds in Acre, where he learned that Maria, the woman who had pretended to be Robert, had fallen out of favor with the Templars. Realizing that he was going to need to go to Cyprus, he decided to take her hostage and, pull information out of her, and he sets off. Here he discovers that with Robert's death, a new Templar Grand Master stood up, Armand. To be able to face off against a newly forming Templar order, Altair teams up with a local resistance faction who are opposing Armand's newly formed repressive government. With the help of this resistance, he manages to learn of a Templar archive on this island, so he decides to remove the Templars from the island while getting at their archive. While he was going through the officers of the Templar order, killing them one at a time, he began to form a relationship with Maria. Maria was in a weird situation. She had mixed feelings for Altair because she hated him for sparing her life because it also ruined her life. But eventually she did start to develop feelings for him and begin to care about him. He convinced her to aid him while in Cyprus by telling her that she could kill him, but wouldn't the Templar order welcome her back if she would just give them the Apple of Eden instead? She agreed that this was a better option and she began to spend far more time with Altair in hopes of getting the apple. Eventually, he did manage to kill the new head of the Templar Order, and he discovered the archives underneath Cyprus. He didn't learn very much from the archive as it crumbled when Altair got in there and he had to flee. But before returning to Masyaf, Altair expressed an interest to travel the world with Maria and use the Apple of Eden to see the world and establish the Assassin Order all over the world. At this time, Maria had officially denounced the Templar Order and she decided to go with him, but she did warn him about abusing the powers of the Apple. While Altair listened, he did feel that he could use the power for good and keep it in check. So upon returning to Masyaf, Altair went to work using the apple to gain extensive knowledge of the entire world. It was in 1195 that he got married to Maria, and they had two children, Darum and Seth. During these periods, he spent a good amount of time traveling the old world to promote the ways of the Assassin's Order. And the beginning of the end for the Assassin's Order came when Altair had officially led the order to one of its greatest peaks. In 1217, Genghis Khan was advancing over the east with great success in battle, and Altair suspected that it was due to being assisted by a piece of Eden. So Maria, Darum, and him all became accomplished crossbowmen, and they left for Mongolia to assassinate Genghis Khan himself. While he was gone, he named Malik the head of the Assassin's Order. The assassination didn't have very many problems, although Altair began to get sloppier as he was aging, and he needed his son to make the final kill for him. When they returned, it was 11 years later, the year 1228. After their return, they were greeted by Swami, a former apprentice that none of them actually liked. They learned that in their absence, the entire fortress of Masyaf had fallen into ruin. Seth, Altair's other son, had fled with his family to Alamat, and Malik had been thrown into prison. With no mentor for the order, Abbas had formed a council to lead the order. Now, for those of you who don't remember, Abbas was Altair's childhood friend. And it was Abbas's father who had killed Altair's father, and then his father had committed suicide in front of Altair as a child. Now Altair found all of this rather fishy, so he sent Darum to Alamat to retrieve his brother. And he went with Maria to meet this new council, and he found that it was led by the most weak-minded of the order. Abbas explained that Seth had actually been killed weeks earlier when he learned that Malik was going to try and take control of the order. Altair, furious at this news, demanded that Abbas return the order to him as it was in the statutes of the order. But Abbas simply stood up and said, "They're not in there anymore. We removed the statutes." And he kicked both Altair and Maria out of the council chambers. They both then returned home, where they mourned the loss of their son. Maria then convinced Altair that Malik wouldn't have betrayed him, so they decided to get Malik out of the dungeon to get a better explanation. After showing that he still had his assassin's moves, Altair and Maria found Malik ragged, hair to the ground, and skinny to the bone. Malik explained that 2 years ago Abbas had staged a coup, and he killed Seth and he framed Malik for the order. He then regretted that he had not been a better leader, and he stated that Altair would never have let this happen. Altair and Maria decided to confront Abbas, but when they went to him, he just demanded the apple from Altair. Surprisingly, Altair agreed to give him the apple, but Swami went forward to claim the prize, and when he did so, he whispered that he had killed Seth, and he whispered Seth's last words to Altair. Enraged by this news, Altair used the apple to force Swami to self-injure himself. But Maria became fearful of Altair using the apple in this manner, and she tried to stop Swami from hurting himself, but this just caused her to be murdered by Swami. Altair considered for a moment the possibility of using the apple to kill everyone and everything around him, but instead he chose to flee Masyaf and go to Alamut, where he would spend his days with Darum and Darum's family. It took quite some time, but eventually Altair grieved enough for his wife, and he decided to spend the rest of his days learning as much as he could from the apple, and he eventually discovered a first civilization vault underneath Alamut. This vault contained contraptions known as memory seals that he used to put his most significant memories into them, and he saved the last one for the end of his life. Well, more time passed, and Altair decided to retake Masyaf. Upon his return, he learned that Abbas was heavily taxing the residents of the city, and the assassins were no longer offering protection to anybody. Seeing that the entire order had crumbled around the leadership of Abbas, Altair decided to go into Masyaf and live the original code, in hopes of drawing out assassins who were still loyal to the original assassin code. It was here that he met Tazim, Malik's son, who was one of the few assassins left who followed the old code, and using this small band of rebels, Altair made his way to Abbas himself, where eventually he came face to face with the man that he once called a friend. In a last-ditch effort, Abbas sent every assassin after Altair and dared him to win without taking a life. But Altair just raised his hand and he shot Abbas with a hidden gun, one of the weapons that he designed while peering into the Apple of Eden for all of these years. He ran up to his former friend and he held him in his arms. And Abbas was still furious at Altair and said that he didn't believe what Altair had told him about his father. Abbas couldn't believe that his father would betray the order and take his own life in guilt. Altair must have been wrong, and he'll find out if this was true in the afterlife. With Abbas dead, Altair was the mentor of the order once again, and he began to rebuild everything that he once held so dearly. He spent the next decade recording everything about the order in a library beneath Masyaf, and sending the order out to the far reaches of the world. He stated that it was time for the order to spread out and not be contained by Masyaf any longer. Things were good for the assassins once again, but that was until 1257 when the Mongols came for their revenge and they attacked the fortress of Masyaf. Altair refused to leave this time, and he gave the codex that he had written everything in to a man named Niccolo Polo, and he gave him the memory sticks, but he did keep that last one still. He then met with his son after he ensured the rest of the fortress had been evacuated. The two men stood outside of the library that Altair had spent 10 years building, and Darum was confused. Why would his father not come with him? But Altair explained, this isn't a library. It's a vault for everything important to the assassins and their history. And he intended to seal himself in the Apple of Eden inside. After saying his final farewells to Darum, Altair sealed himself in the vault and he hid the apple inside of there. He then sat down in a chair in the middle of the room, where he silently and finally passed away as he recorded his last memory stick and placed it on his person. The assassin order lived thanks to Altair's last actions of spreading the members far and wide across the world, and his memory sticks would eventually be found by Ezio, and Ezio would also find the corpse of Altair. But the story ends here, folks, and if you want to know what Ezio did to find everything, well then you're going to have to go check out our Ezio series of videos. I'm Benny for Eligible Monster, and I'll see you guys right here next time at the Eligible Monster channel.